very easily hit the wall behind you without noticing it. And the very same thing can happen with lifting operations extremely easily. So let's be really careful with that one as well. And then mechanical hazards. And this is actually something that we produce machines that have, by definition, plenty of mechanical hazards. And we have good protective tools in place. We have good protective mechanisms in place. But those mechanisms are not worth anything if we are bypassing them. So that's the first point. We should never bypass any of the safety mechanisms on our machines. And we also need to, if we know there are risks, we need to implement critical controls, whether that is the next person, whether that is somebody next to emergency stop if we need to be doing something that is at risk. And actually, that leads to the part that whenever we are doing something with mechanical hazards, we need to do a risk assessment. And we need to eliminate the risk to the extent possible. If something is, it's not an excuse that you are fixing something and it's not stopped for the fact that it's easier when it's not stopped. That's not an excuse.
Right. Because maybe we should just expand on this bypassing point here, because that applies not only to this life-saving rule, but to every situation.
Yeah.
Folks, just be very, very careful with this, because somebody that bypasses a safety circuit, somebody that bypasses a lockout tag or a control is a very serious breach of our company policy, but also it could be a criminal breach. And for good reason, because it could lead to someone being killed very, very quickly. So that applies actually across
all the rules, actually, pretty much.
So please be careful. You're right. There are times where something has to be adjusted, but it needs to be done with the right authorization and the right supervision.
Exactly. And that's never a decision that is done on the spot, that now we need to do this for the fact to make our life simpler or things like that. That needs to be very careful indeed. And as mentioned over there in a little bit smaller text, I mean, we need to remember that the safety critical controls come in multiple forms. So there are quite a many of them, and there's nothing that is more or less important. Full stop. It's not allowed to bypass them unless it is done in a very controlled way. And that's a really good addition. And this is something that, how would I say, you might easily have the tendency to think. So, but that is simply not acceptable. Then underground safety, and this is actually an area where I think we actually discussed this when we were discussing the life-saving rules in annual key on Monday, and this was an area where I think we got a little bit of the feedback that we are doing quite a many. Of course, we are used to operating in underground, and in most of the places we are doing things pretty well all in there, but we are doing that more by instinct rather than by a structured approach. And that's something that we also need to ensure that we are following a structured approach. And of course, the first part is the obvious one once again. Whatever is the local practice of using PPE, that's the mandatory, and I should have a word minimum there actually at the end.
Yes.
There's no crime, having extra PPE, but there's no excuse on having at least the minimum PPE when going underground. And it's a good practice to have a first aid kit and a water bottle handy, because the other part also is, I'm sure most of the people in the call have been underground. Places are quite dark. You might be there for a little bit longer than you anticipated. And
quite regularly.
And it's nice to at least get a sip of water during that time. So, I mean, that's extremely important. And also, of course, when working at a situation which requires those using dust mask, hearing and eye protection, of course, as required, that's extremely clear. And for any sites we are visiting, we need to ensure we have the permission from the site to go underground on that day, or then type of the blanket permission for that person, that this person is allowed to operate underground, and that must be obtained before entering any underground site, and also ensure that if there is a mandatory underground safety training as part of prior to going underground, as there are in most of the sites where we are operating, that needs to be